Well, oh, well, oh, well, oh, well, oh, well. It is time for us now to delve into the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras as portrayed in the Vedas. I've been excited to read about Soma. Now, I have to find out how exactly I would find this in my book, because our book presents the nakshatras in a sort of an interesting way. It talks about Soma, but in order to talk about Soma, it actually begins talking about the Vishva Devas, which are the deities of Uttara Ashada, which means we are going to have to get to the chapter on Uttara Ashada and Vishva Devas later. And that is an important one because it talks about the idea, in a way, of the creation of Soma. And that will be an important story for anybody who wants to know about the narrative of how Soma was introduced into the Vedic literature. So if you're interested, check out Uttara Ashada's nakshatra and the deity, which is the Vishva Devas episode that's going to be happening eventually in this series. That means the next one we need to start moving towards is Devatas, Mula, Ashlesha, Tanishta. Here we go. So, it looks like this is going to be digging into the VASUS in the Vedas. Soma Raj of Mrigashirsha seems to be considered one of the VASUS, which is it's not necessarily, well, let me just show this picture here because I got it in here. The VASUS are collectively a different part of the full table of all of the nakshatras, as we can see here. The Vishvadevas is their own thing. Prajalpati, Brahma, is his own thing. Brihaspati, which in a way is Jupiter, is a sage in the sages, and they're their own thing. The Adityas is the sons of the mother of creation. Rudras is a certain aspect of the forces of Shiva in a certain way. And then the Vasus, as I understand it, has to do with the tattvas, and it kind of deals with aspects of creation. I want to do a quick little peek because I know that there is an introduction to what exactly these guys are in here. So, Agni in the 8 Vasus. Agni, yes, Anala. So Agni is considered one of the Vasus. The 8 Vasus are energetic light beings and the Puranic sons of Dharma, the mind-born son of Brahma, and his wife Vasu. These are the great elements, the Mahabhutas of air, fire, water, and earth, and also ether, along with the sun, the moon, Dhruva, the pole star, and the fixed stars, the nakshatras. Now, this is coming from a little depiction of what the Vasus are and how they're kind of different from the other categorizations of nakshatras and deities. The deities called Vasus, because they are preceded by fire, that's Agni, the first Vasu, they abound in splendor and might, and are severally named Apaha, which is water, Dhruva, the pole star, Soma, which is the moon, Dara, which is earth, Anila, which is wind, Anala, which is fire, Pratyusha, which is the sun at daybreak, Prabhasa, it's the splendor of light, which is the nakshatras, And that all comes from the Vishnu Purana, Book 1, Chapter 15. So the Vishnu Purana is categorizing the Vasus as the Mahabhutas, as their own elemental aspect of creation. It's in a way, it's an embodied aspect of the elements of creation. The Srimad Bhagavatam singles out Agni as the supreme amongst the Vasus. Vishnu is also the equivalent amongst the Adityas. Rudra is the greats amongst the Rudras, and Indra is the great of the demigods. So Agni and Aditya Indra come together to form Vishaka, and Vishaka of Indra Agni is one of the Vasus. So the Vasus are these sort of elemental manifestations in this sort of way. And that's why in this part of the book, the author has categorized Soma as, this is chapter 22 of the book, so it's not one of the early chapters anymore. Even though Mrigashirsha, we've learned, is part of the narrative of Brahma chasing the deer, and then Shiva, as Ardra, wants to kill Brahma for that. The story is, it's like Pulp Fiction. There's many narratives being woven through that one narrative. So we're going to look up Mrigashirsha, page 250. We're going to be exploring what Soma is in the Vedas and how we can interpret, later on at the end of this, we're going to interpret natives of the Mrigashira Nakshatra. So, Soma Raj, which is Mrigashirsha's, make us more glorious. With your sweet and most gladdening stream, flow pure, O Soma, on thy way, pressed out for Indra, for his drink. Flow onward with thy juice unto the banquet of the mighty gods. Flow hither for our strength and fame. That comes from the Rig Veda, Mandala 9, chapter 1, verse 4. It goes to show you that even in the Rig Veda, the idea of Soma bearing the self-realization that would give Indra, the Indriyas, the senses, the true strength and nurturing that it needs to do greatness in the world. The Rig Veda already had a sense of this. We'll learn a bit more about Soma once we dig into the character of Indra. And you can find out more about that in the section of the series once it's all finished, talking about Jesta. Indra is my favorite character. My moon is in Jesta. So I guess it makes sense that my favorite character is myself, being Indra. Part 1, we are going to be exploring Soma's descent to Earth. The Rig Veda declares Soma as a devata flowing in celestial wisdom. Soma is the adornment of the Vedic sacrificial ceremonies, the delight and ecstasy of men, and the sap, the rasa, of life. Mere mortals enter the celestial realm of the gods through his honey nectar portal. We have drunk Soma, become immortal. We have attained the light discovered by the gods. That's from the Rig Veda, Mandala 8. The hymns of the Rig Veda address Soma in a twofold manner. On a literal level, Soma is a plant that grows in forests and on mountaintops. In this form, Soma is revered for its ecstasy-inducing juice that nourishes the gods and man. It's like the classic psychedelic that people have even tried to explore as possibly being related to the kykeon of the ancient Greek rites of Eleusis and Dionysus. That's what it's often literally described as, and that's what Indra is always drinking. Again, the metaphor for whether it's like a medicine that is almost psychedelic versus actually being soma in regards to the moon of self-realization. Sometimes those are both interchangeable. It's just something that you got to read in each step of the way. The radiant reddish-brown nectar of immortality resides within its green-tinted shoots. On a mystical level, this red young child of heaven is a celestial devata, declared by all as Devam Devaya Devayu, the divine favorite of all divinities. That comes from the Rig Veda. Soma's transition from plant to godhead, his celestial birth, is reenacted during the Soma Yagna. And this is, yagna means sacrifice, or like the sacrifice ceremony. There are many of these in Vedic culture, and the yagna ceremony is in particular given great importance, not only in this book, but the nakshatras. The great yagna, the Vedic yagna ceremony, is built around the narrative of the nakshatras, and some say vice versa, in a way, when you think about it. The Soma Yagna, I believe, is a particular type of ceremony that is done for Soma. When first purchased, the Soma stalks are covered in a white cloth and placed upon the Soma cart. An assembly of priests lead the cart across the sacrificial field to its destination, a covered hall, sadas, situated in the center of the great sacrificial grounds, which is Mahavedi. The stalks of the Soma plant are ceremoniously removed and ushered inside the hall, where they are placed upon a throne covered by a black antelope skin. The antelope skin serves as an embryonic cover from which the Soma stalks mysteriously transform into a celestial godhead. Upon his birth as a god, Soma is consecrated as Soma Raj, King Soma, and worshipped as a member of the 33 divine forces. Yet his origin is much more ancient than this. According to a legend in the Rig Veda, Soma descends to earth from the third region of heaven, born by an eagle, Suparna, or falcon, Shena. Stretching out in flight, holding the stem of Soma, the eagle brought the exhilarating and intoxicating drink from the distance. The bird clutched the Soma tightly after he took it from that highest heaven. This comes from Rig Veda Mandala 4. The retrieval is depicted as a churning of the heavens for Soma, reminding one of the well-known Samudramatana legend told in the Puranas, where the Devas and Asuras churn the milky white ocean in hopes of retrieving the Amrita of immortality, which is Soma, from the ocean's floor. You can read more about that in the chapter on Ashlesha in this series, as well as, well, that the story is called the Samudramatana. It's the churning of the ocean. Now, earthbound with Soma in his claw, the eagle is struck by the arrow of Krishanu, an archer who closely guards Soma. The bird escapes injury, but loses a feather that falls to earth and turns into a parna feather tree. Upon rescuing Soma, the eagle delivers him to Indra and the gods. The falcon took and brought Soma, bearing 1,000 libations with him, yea, 10,000. The bold one, the bird, left the enemies behind. He was wise in the wild joy of Soma, as he left the foolish ones behind. Again, that comes from Rig Veda, Mandala 4, around the same area of the literature. This famous, though somewhat elusive legend is known as the myth of Suparna, a lore expounded upon in the Brahmanas. The Aitareya Brahmana explains that the gods desire Soma, who is far away in the heavens. They recruit the 3 Vedic meters, the Gayatri, the Tristubha, and the Jagati, to locate Soma's whereabouts. The meters, which is like the Vedic, the Vedic literature is all about the different, it's a very psychedelic thing that's being conveyed here. The meters are the ways, like the rhythm of the poetry of the Vedas. And these different meters have a rhythm that bring out an instinctive aspect of awareness. Because every aspect of literature in the Vedas is condensed into gems of eternal wisdom, not just the words. You can't just translate the Rig Veda into English and hope to be getting the wisdom that is compiled there. You have to actually speak the Sanskrit and understand what the rhythm means. Just like how we've already said in the Taittiriya Brahmana, each sutra has a certain rhythmic meter, and that meter has something that is conveyed numerologically, numero-mathematically, right? So the meters themselves, the 3 Vedic meters, Gayatri, Tristubha, and Jagati, transform into birds, Suparnas, and fly up to heaven in search of Soma in this story. Now the first to leave are the Tristubha and Jagati meter. They are exhausted before reaching the heights of heaven and soon return to earth. Next, the great mantra, Gayatri, the great meter, Gayatri, takes flight. It is Gayatri that discovers Soma, but Soma is guarded by many. Frightening his wardens, Gayatri snatches Soma with her feet and her bill, the bill of her beak. As she begins her descent to earth, she is struck by an arrow released by Krishanu. The arrow pierces Gayatri's leg, but does not stop her flight, and Gayatri is successful in her rescue mission. Now, the author gives a footnote that the Satapatha Brahmana contains 2 versions of this legend. One closely conforms with this one, with the above. And in the second version, the Gandharvas, the celestial musicians, steal Soma and hide him in the far-off heavens. Recruited by the gods, this character of Vak, perhaps in the form of the Gayatri, finds Soma and brings Soma back to earth. We learn a bit more about that when we go into the chapter on Shravana. Now, in any case, this is an important story describing how the Gayatri meter is what brings Soma back down to earth. Now, in an earlier chapter in the Vedas, or actually this would be the Aitareya Brahmana that we're talking about now, Soma ruled Mrigashirsha is described as that space in the sky where Prajalpati transforms into a stag and pursues his daughter, herself having transformed into a doe, a deer. The deer is the stellar symbol of Mrigashirsha, Mriga means deer or antelope, and Shirsha means head. So Mrigashirsha translates as the head of the deer. And it has also to do with the positioning of the stars, is partly where all this stuff came from. It's interesting to think, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Are the stories coming from the fact that there's a deer in the sky, a deer's head, where the space of Mrigashirsha is? Or is the Mrigashira Nakshatra an inherent archetype which they saw in the stars? Often these things can be hard to say. Sometimes maybe it's both in a way. Maybe the stars magically are aligned with the nakshatra wisdom. Something interesting to think about. Now, in this earlier chapter, when Soma ruled Mrigashirsha, is described as the space in the sky where Brahma transformed into a stag in order to pursue his own daughter, because Brahma is the creator. So anything that Brahma creates is going to be a creation of his. And in order to procreate, he wants to further pursue his own daughter, which is creation. It's creator making love with creation, which the earliest Vedas don't have this tone of incest in it, but then the Puranas describe there's incestuous nature that can be, described as the ill that it is. So it's an interesting thing. You can read more about that in the chapter on Rohini. But essentially, Brahma transforms into a stag and pursues his daughter, who has transformed herself into a doe, a deer. Now, because Rudra, which is Shiva, sees that the gentleness of the deer of creation is being absorbed by the pure absolute force of the creator, taking aim, Shiva pierces Prajapati, pierces Brahma with his arrow. In the retrieval of Mrigashirsha from the heavens, which is Soma, in the retrieval of Soma from the heavens, there's likewise a chase. For here, an eagle is pierced by an arrow when chased by an archer. Right. Okay, I see what this is saying. In the story of Soma, we have Soma is in the sky, and an eagle has to bring it down to earth, and there's an archer that shoots the eagle. Both legends suggest a key feature of Mrigashirsha. It's the aggressive pursuit of desired objects. Interesting. Now, this same theme is once again emphasized in the Puranic legend of Soma's hot pursuit of lovely Tara, which is Brihaspati's wife. Overtaken by his own pleasure-seeking nature, Soma unabashedly abducts Tara. Now, Tara likewise fancies Soma and decides to leave Brihaspati, the sage. A great battle, the Tarakamaya Samgrama, it's the war on account of Tara, breaks out as the gods attempt to reconcile the situation that is happening here. At last, Tara is convinced that she must return to her husband, Brihaspati. But by then, she has become pregnant with Soma's child. Tara gives birth to a playful baby boy, the Buddha, Mercury, at the same time, or Buddha, which is this Sanskrit word for Mercury. In time, Soma, this is why they say Mercury is the child of the moon. If you've ever heard that in Vedic mythology. Mercury is the child of Soma, the moon. In time, Soma consents to Brihaspati's request to adopt Buddha as his own son, a gesture that creates an uncomfortable relationship between Buddha and Soma, Mercury and the moon. Mercury and the moon being this, aspect of each other that, in Vedic astrology, the moon and Mercury are not good friends. Or rather, the moon is an enemy to Mercury, although Mercury has the moon for an enemy, and the moon is delighted by Mercury. So that's part of the consciousness that's happening there, which is just deep metaphorical stuff. If you understand Vedic astrology, there's some gold being conveyed here. Now, this legend also highlights, as does Prajapati's pursuit of his own daughter, this highlights Mrigashirsha's Shakti of Prinana. It's the act of pleasing or gratifying oneself. Interestingly, one of Soma's epithets is prarokana, seducing or inciting to love. And it's interesting that the moon, as I said, relates with gently exploring the chitta, the sensual and passionate desires within oneself. This also relates to the picture of what Soma is, which is essentially ecstasy. Inner ecstasy coming from self-realization and acting on and manifesting that self-realization playfully into reality. Now, next chapter, we're looking at the Ishti ceremonies, and Soma ruled Mrigashirsha. The Ishti ceremonies. The solemn Vedic sacrificial ceremonies are called Shrota Yagnas. Shrotas are categorized in various ways. One system of classification is their division into Ishtis. In this instance, Ishti means an oblation or sacrificial offering. Pashubhandas, that's animal sacrifices. And Soma Yagnas, which is Soma ceremonies. So that's the Vedic sacrificial ceremonies, and this is how they are categorized. Ishtis, which is oblation or sacrificial offering. Pashubhantas, which is animal sacrifices, and Soma Yagnas, which is the Soma ceremony. Ishtis involve the offering of various sacrificial substance to the fire on behalf of the gods. And again, these sacrifice ceremonies are a key element of ancient Vedic gnosis. Very important for us to understand the roots of what Vedic really is. The model sacrifice in this category is the Darsha Purnamasa. Darsha Purnamasa. It's the new and full moon ceremony. Other ceremonies belonging to this group are the Ishtis to the lunar nakshatras, as well as Agnadhana, setting up of the sacrificial fires, Agnihotra, which is twice daily offering to the fire, and Chaturmasyas, which is the 4 seasonal ceremonies. I've heard of the Agnihotra from the Robert E. Svadoba's literature of, I can't think of the name, of Kundalini, basically. The Agnihotra is an important one in his Kundalini Part 2, talking about the Agoris and that whole thing. Ishti ceremonies are accompanied by invitatory Purunuvakya and oblation yajnas verses. So there's invitatory and oblation verses. The priest recites an invitation prayer to the intended devata, beckoning him to the sacrifice with words of his glory. Once seated upon the sacrificial grounds, the god is offered his favorite food in concert with an oblation mantra. Like the Puro Nuvakya, The yajna includes praises of adornment and reverence to the god involved. The divine presence of Soma and his nakshatra Mrigashirsha are invoked with the following invitation verse. King Soma has come with Mrigashirsha, his nakshatra. The auspicious nakshatra is his beloved dwelling place. Becoming strong in many ways among the creatures, let him give seed and offspring to the sacrificer. And this comes from TB, which I believe is going to be... Yeah, that actually is a part of the Taittiriya Brahmana that comes from. And the same thing with this next piece, because the Taittiriya Brahmana has the main sutras that are found at the beginning of it. I believe it's at the beginning. And as well, there is further commentary on all the nakshatras, which we are looking at examples of what else is given there. So what we read is the corresponding oblation verse is, to that one which is thy nakshatra, Mrigashirsha's, the dear one, O king, the dearest of the dear ones. To that nakshatra of thee, O Soma, we would offer worship with oblation. Be beneficent to our biped, meaning our men, beneficent to our quadruped, i.e. our animals. This is likely why Victakara mentioned such an oblation in his reading, which we've already discussed, in Victakara's supplication. Now, insight into a devata's nature is gleaned from his Puranuvakya and Yajya verses. We can see into the devata's nature from these verses. For example, Soma's close association with fertility and progeny and his benevolent nature are revealed in these verses. Now, the Brahmanas also include prescriptive passages that specify the proper oblation for the godhead. Ishti offerings are sacrificial substances prepared in various ways. Examples include cakes made of pounded rice or barley, purodashas, unpounded rice or barley boiled with butter and milk, which is called karu, soft porridge, karamba, curds, which is payasya, milk, which is payas, fresh boiled milk mixed with sour milk, samnaya, and so on. On certain occasions, non-cooked substances are offered, which includes blades of grass, various powders, flowers, and medicinal plants. Ishti ceremonies often begin and conclude with an ajyabhaga, which is melted butter, oblation, to the sacrificial fire. It's often like ghee. It's probably what's kind of being conveyed there. In the Ishtis to the lunar nakshatras ceremony, the following passage specifies syamaka, which is millet boiled in milk, as Soma's official offering, Soma's sacrificial offering. It's millet boiled in milk. Note also that by making this offering, the Yajamana hopes to obtain sovereignty over plants. And what we read, this comes from the Taittiriya Brahmana. Soma desired, may I conquer sovereignty over the plants. He, the Yajamana, offered in milk that well-known sacrificial pap made of syamaka to Soma and to Mrigashirsha. Consequently, he conquered sovereignty over the plants. This comes from the Taittiriya Brahmana. Soma's supremacy of the plant kingdom is as ancient as the Rig Veda, where he is honored as monarch, Soma Raj, of the plant world. It's interesting when we consider that plant nature was given as the kingdom of which Mrigashirsha Nakshatra is associated. In the elaborate Vedic yagnas, each sacerdotal rite, liturgical utterance, and sanctified oblation is emblematic. It's an emblem of something. It's symbolic. Hence, though seemingly insignificant, even a devata's preferred sacrificial offering serves as a metaphor for an inherent aspect or attribute of the god. Right. By way of illustration, in the above passage, Soma is offered millet cooked in milk. Now, millet is a highly valued nutritional grain in India. Like the Soma stalks, it flourishes in uncultivated areas, raw areas that aren't ready for farming, really. Millet can still grow there. So, we've been talking about Mrigashirsha as being having this ability to diffuse and adapt. Hence, millet represents Soma's resilient and spiritually nourishing nature. It is prepared in milk, another indication of Soma's wholesome and sustaining nature. More critically, milk is symbolic of the nectar of immortality, Soma, believed to be contained in the moon, and as well, it also represents semen, which has some connection to progeny, sustaining, continuing. In similar fashion, Indra is offered a pap of red rice grains, hayana. Like Indra Jyesta, the most excellent one, red rice is considered the best of all rice grains. Savitri, the quickener or impeller, is presented quick-growing rice, plashuka, while black rice grains are reserved for Agni, as the path of this godhead is black. Rudra Pashupati, Lord of the Beasts, is likened to all things wild and uncultivated. Thus, Rudra is served gaveduka, which is wild corn seeds, as his sacrificial food. So this is just giving examples of how the oblations and food offered reflect on the character and nature of the nakshatra and of the deity associated with it. Often, a tale or mythological exploit offers another explanation for a devata's sacrificial offering. In Soma's case, the Brahmanas recount a time in which Indra, a god who depends on Soma for his Indriya Virya, his virile strength, consumes a large batch of it, which is belonging to Tavistri. So this is in the Brahmanas. Indra, who depends on Soma for his virile strength, consumes a large batch of Soma, which belonged to Tavistri. Now, unbeknownst to Indra, Tavistri bewitches the draft. Upon swigging the entire lot, Indra falls asunder, and the consumed Soma flows out of every pore of his body. Everywhere the Soma spills, millet sprouts. So this is part of why millet is deemed Soma's sacrificial oblation. The nurturingness of millet. Now elsewhere, a short tale explains how barley cakes came to be Varuna's favorite oblation. It turns out that Varuna once struck King Soma in the eye, causing a part of Soma's eye to fall out. Soma's injured part lands on the ground, from whence sprouts barley. So barley is declared Varuna's exclusive offering. It's interesting when you ferment barley as an ingredient in beer and other alcoholic beverages. Perhaps this is why Puranic Varuna is known for his Varunishura, which is an alcoholic beverage. Cool. Barley-based alcoholic beverage. Now, the next part of our reading, we are looking at the Agnistoma, which is the one-day Soma Yagna. It's a one-day Soma ceremony, sacrifice ceremony. The Agnistoma is a one-day Soma ceremony and the model format for all other Soma Yagnas. The main oblation is juice pressed from the Soma stalks. The elaborate and exacting sacrificial protocol for the performance of a Soma Yagna is articulated in the Brahmanas. It'd be interesting to know what that Soma is, because it's very clearly described as a certain particular plant, possibly something that contains DMT, or possibly that's just something very nourishing. Now, the protocol for this Agnistoma begins with the purchase of a plot of land from the king. The land is architected with the sacred geometry of the sacrificial grounds in mind. And there is a whole layout to the sacrificial grounds that's beautiful and psychedelic. You know, I could probably show it here. 317. I think it's important for just a little bit of extra context so you guys can all see the importance of this Vedic sacrifice ceremony. If you could see here, you know, there's a lot to look at here, but essentially each one of the pieces of things going on in this part of the land given here has something to do with the Soma Yagna ceremony and the great Vedic Yagna ceremonies that have been done since ancient times. When this is done, the land is prepared for the sacred ceremony, and 16 priests are hand-selected to perform this Soma Yagna. You can read a little bit more about this in the chapter on Prahaspati, which is Pushya, the Lord of Holy Power, which will be 3 readings from this one. Now, most Soma Yagnas require the erection of a sacrificial altar, it's Agnikayana, formed in the shape of an eagle, Suparna, or a falcon, Shiena. Its design is based upon the legendary bird that rescues Soma from a faraway place and brings him back to earth. Thus, performed with meticulous precision, the Agnikayana represents the restoration and rebirth of Prajapati by Agni. And you can see more about that in the chapter on Kritika, which we've already done. The construction of the sacred fire altar is a 12-month ritual preceding the Soma Yagna. It goes to show how much slow, meticulous intention is put into these beautiful ceremonies. When completed, the ground around the altar is excavated 2 to 3 inches deep and covered with grass, barhis. This area is called the Vedi. The gods take their seats upon the grass-filled Vedi when implored to join the sacrifice. And we hear a quote that says, Vishve Devaha Shrunuta Imam Havam Me. O Vishvadevas, hear my beckoning. This is something that is spoken during this ceremony. The Soma Yagna commences with the Yajamana's mental resolve, and that's called Yagha Sankalpa, as well as a verbal announcement of his intent to perform the ceremony. An initiation and anointment, Diksha, is performed at this time. Here, Agni and Vishnu are offered an oblation consisting of a cake on 11 potsherds. As ruler of the 8 Vasus, Agni's sacrificial number 8, and as the god who is known for his 3 strides, Vishnu's sacrificial number is 3. Hence, their combined oblations are served on 11 potsherds. Wow, very cool. So you can see how, oftentimes when we read this text, It's basically going through the Vedic yajna ceremonies, which is, again, the whole nakshatra symbolism is permeated with, and vice versa, I should say. Now, the Agni and Vishnu are godheads uniquely associated with initiation. This is because Agni accepts all sacrificial oblations on behalf of the gods, and hence represents all deities. Now, Vishnu encompasses the entire sacrifice, for he is the first godhead to traverse the sacrificial grounds. You can see what that's all about in chapter 10, on the chapter on Shravana, once we get to that. We see that fame and glory go to Vishnu's head for the legend of how Vishnu came to encompass the sacrifice. In similar fashion, the light of Agni, who resides on earth, and the light of Vishnu, who resides in the most remote region of the heavens, encompass the entire universe. Between their lights shine those of all other divinities. Wow, cool. Agni's light is on earth, Vishnu's light is the furthest remote things in the heavens, and between those two is the lights of all the other divinities. I almost want to see where Kritika, I wonder if Shravana is like opposite Kritika. Kritika is 20 degrees Taurus, Shravana is in Aquarius, so not quite. I digress. So, thus, back to the yajna ceremony, by making an offering to Agni and Vishnu, the yajamana, the priest, and his, I think the yajamana might be the person who is the sacrifice is for and is all about. The yajamana and his wife are embraced by all godheads and the sacrifice as they are declared reborn. Many of these sacrifice ceremonies revolve around marriage, and that's a lot of the time what we'll be seeing here is it's a married couple going through this. Next, the priests perform an elaborate set of rituals pertaining to the acquisition, extraction, and purification of the soma stalks. Once the sacrificial draft of soma is ready for consumption, Indra and the gods are summoned to descend upon the grounds and partake of the divine nectar. During the Agnistoma, 3 daily soma pressings take place, morning, midday, and evening. The morning libation is dedicated to Agni, head of the Vasus, and the Vasus. The midday is for Indra, leader of the Rudras, and the Rudras themselves. And the evening libation goes to Aditi, mother of all the gods, and the Vishvadevas. Now, there are 3 kinds of gods, the Vasus, the Rudras, and the Adityas. Between them, the press feasts of soma juice are divided. The morning pressing belongs to the Vasus, the midday pressing to the Rudras, and the third pressing to the Adityas. And that little reading comes from, I believe, let me just check to make sure. Yeah, the Satapatha Brahmana is where that comes from. On this day, the Soma Yajna commences at the break of dawn as priests beckon those devatas associated with the early morning hours. Agni, Usas, which is dawn, Surya, the sun, and the Ashvins. Hearing sweet praises sung to her glory, Ushas awakens in the twilight hours and swings open the doors of heaven. Born on the chariot of the Ashvini Kumaras, she sheds her light on the morning darkness, announcing the commencement of the sacrificial day. At this time, Agni is rekindled. And this is this time during the day of the sacrifice. I have my friend Reshma Narayansamy. I hope I'm saying your name correct. Nice to see you, Reshma. Thanks for hanging out while we talk about some nakshatras today. It's nice to have some folks hanging out while we go through Vedic literature, which is just something so close to my heart. Now, we're still talking about the Vedic Soma Yagna ceremony. Many gods are invoked to participate in the 3 offerings of Soma pressings juice. Yet only a few partake from a Soma vessel bearing their name. 3 sets of Devatadvandvas, that's a tricky one, Devatadvandvas, which is a combination of 2 gods, are served in the morning draft. So it's Indra Vayu, which is Indra and Vayu, to whom the first libation is offered. Mitra Varuna, which is Mitra and Varuna, who receives the second. And the Nasatyas, which is Ashvini and Kumaras, who are offered the third libation. You can see a little bit why that is when you read the chapter on Svati Nakshatra, who is ruled by Vayu. Now that's just in the morning libation. The midday offering belongs exclusively to Indra. Of course. This right is conferred on him because of his victory over the colossal demon Vritra in the ancient Vedas. Impetuous, thunderer, strong, quelling the mighty, king, potent Vritra slayer, Soma drinker, may he come hither with his yoked bay horses. May Indra be gladdened at the noon libation. That phrase itself comes from Rig Veda, Mandala 5, which is wonderful. You know, by reading this text, we see the context for so many of these things that we see in the Rig Vedas that seem to be scattered. This book is so good for condensing them into what they're all about. Indra partakes of the draught from the Mahendra, the great Indra, sacrificial vessel. He's got a vessel all for his own. Grateful for the support of the howling Maruts, known as the Rudras, during battle times, Indra bestows upon them their own Soma cup, the Marutvatya Graha. The Maruts join Indra in the midday offering. The morning libation commences with Ushas, ushering in the rays of the sun, and the evening libation occurs moments before Nakta, dusk, overtakes the light of the sun. The evening pressing includes an offering to the Adityas. They partake from the Aditya sacrificial vessel. Aditya Savitri is awarded his own special libation, offered with the recitation of the Gayatri mantra. Tat Savitur Varenyam. There's a little bit of not really a melody to this, but a flow. Om Boom Bhuva Svaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dio Yona Prachodayat. I didn't do it quite right, but that's me going for it. And this is the author's translation of the great Gayatri mantra. May we attain that excellent radiance of the god Savitri, so he may stimulate our visions. There's a lot to that mantra, and you'll learn about it if you look up things in Vedic. The Gayatri mantra is a condensation of all the meanings and symbols and wisdom given in the ancient Vedas. The Gayatri mantra is very important. So this would be the second evening. It's an offering to the Adityas, and they recite the Gayatri mantra during this part of the sacrifice ceremony. Next, a Shastra is recited in honor of the Vishva Devas. The mantra beckons the godheads who depend on the Soma draft, which is all 33 divine forces, to partake of their share of the bliss-filled nectar of immortality. Of course, the Vishva Devas and the 33 divine forces is all of the deities that make up what we know of as the nakshatras. Other devatas are summoned to the evening libation, including Java Prithvi, which is heaven and earth, and the 3 Ribhu brothers, but none of them partake from a personal Soma vessel. You can watch the chapter on Chitra, also known as Tvastri, it's the maker of all forms, about the Ribhu brothers and how they earn their seats at the evening libation. Now the libations to the godheads conclude with a shloka to Aditi's veneration. Aditi is heaven, Aditi is the air, Aditi is mother, father, and son. Aditi is all gods. Aditi is the 5 classes of creatures. Aditi is what is born. Aditi is what is to be born. She, Aditi, is mother. She is father. She is son. In her are the Vishva Devas. In her, the 5 classes of creatures. She is what is born. She is what is to be born. That comes from the Aitareya Brahmana. It's almost like the tissue of Mahashakti. I almost perceive Aditi is kind of taking the place of here. It's the vessel of the feminine aspect of reality. Now, what Soma remains in the cups after the 3 libations, the morning, the midday, and the evening libations, is returned to the Sadas, the Soma hall, and offered to the Pitris, the ancestors. In this way, both the gods and ancestors are honored at the Soma Yagna ceremony, which is beautiful, and of course it's necessary in its own way as well. Because we know that the ancestors are a key part of ourselves and all things human as well as all things divine. Now, next up, we're going to be exploring the slaying of Soma. This is our next chapter. We're getting out of the Soma Yagna ceremony and starting to get into a little bit more narrative literature about Soma. Of the hundreds of ceremonial rites and rituals performed in the course of the Soma ceremony, it is the extraction, filtration, and modification of the Soma juice that provides a bird's eye view into Soma's divine nature. Here, a rare find of anthropomorphic similes, accompanied with the melodramatic envisioning of Soma's death, is presented. In illustration of the former, of the anthropomorphic similes, the rishis compare the Soma draft, when ready for consumption, to the letting loose of a chariot horse who is stepping out onto the battlefield. A flood of self-realized energy, or rather, the energy that comes flooding once self-realization occurs. The following highlights the sacrificial protocol associated with the extraction of soma from the stalks and the purification and mixture of its juice. Of interest are the deification of the sacrificial instruments and the corresponding theatrical production of this juice. Each preparatory step is choreographed in a manner intended to alert Indra that his beloved draught is soon ready for consumption. Before the shoots are pressed, the priests dig 4 round resonance holes, 2 rows, 2 in each, an arm's length deep upon the sacrificial grounds. While constructing the sounding holes, they chant, "Mighty are you, sounding holes, with such a mighty sound. Utter mighty speech for Indra." Comes from the Shatapatha Brahmana. 2 pressing boards covered by a reddish-brown bull skin, for the soma juice is reddish-brown, are positioned over the holes. The resonance holes amplify the thunderous sound emanating from the stalks as they are beaten with stones. Wow. Soma roars like a bull over the sounding holes. That's a phrase that comes from Rig Vedas, Mandala 9, chapter 47. The deafening sound is music to Indra's ears. Shows that they combine the devotional moment of the preparation of this whole soma ceremony, the actual sound of them using stones to beat the juice and pulp out of the soma. The whole experience, they want to ground it as a purifying agent. It's really a beautiful thing. My friend Reshma is asking if I can make a video about Shatabisha Nakshatra. And I assure you that I will, Reshma, as soon as I get there, because I'm going to try to go through all the nakshatras. Now, harnessed by the hands of the Advaryu priests, the pressing stones are likened to a team of powerful steeds. When they, the pressing stones, have bellowed, panting, swallowing their food, which is the soma meath, the sound of their loud snorting is like that of steeds. Again, that comes from the Rig Veda, Mandala 10. Elsewhere, these pressing stones are compared to 1,000 shouting men. Their screams arouse and excite Indra. They cry aloud with a strong, exhilarating drink, calling on Indra now, for they have found the meath. The pressing stones are considered enlightened beings, for their green-tinted mouths have drunk of the nectar even before the sacrificial fire and gods have tasted the offering. Wow, enlightened beings. It kind of just shows you that the concept of enlightenment and enlightened beings play a part in the divine pantheon of divinity for the Vedic mind. An important rite in the preparation of the soma stalks is the apyayanam, which means causing to swell ritual. So before the pressing, soma stalks are sprinkled with holy water as a means of softening the shoots and enhancing the sweetness of their juice. The waters are called apas, the water goddesses ruling the devatas. They're the ruling devata of Purva Ashada. May the apas, the goddesses, add sweetness to the soma oblation prepared for the gods, even though it is already quite sweetened. And that comes from Vajaseni Madhyandina Samhita, one of the Samhitas on the Yajna ceremony. So intimately enmeshed are the water goddesses with the extraction of Soma that they are deemed Soma's mothers. Lovingly, they nourish Soma with their milky white waters, causing him to swell, to grow. The great pressing ritual, Mahabhisheka, consists of 3 rounds of thrashing. In between each, extracted Soma juice is poured into a wooden vessel, and the smashed stalks are re-soaked in a vat of water. This goes to show you that there's an instrumentation to the whole process of extracting the Soma, because to them, the Vedic mind is conveying that every aspect of reality, every aspect of the sacrifice, life is the sacrifice. And they build a whole ritual around this sacrifice to the gods of Agni, of what I would call a sum of efforts which is greater than its parts. We are all trying to create a sum of effort which is greater than the parts that we are as an ego. And what is beyond the ego is the divine self-realization, which is ironically the sum which is greater than its parts is actually a lightening, a letting go of the density of the ego. And the whole process of going through this sacrifice of Agni, burning away that which obstructs our realization of the divine. They've made the ceremony, and each step in the ceremony is regarded as sacred and pure and beautiful. It's just the beauty of the ancient Vedic mind. And that's what this whole thing is all about, this whole sacrifice ceremony, including the pressing of the Soma juice. Now, after the final pressing, the juice is filtered through a woolen cloth to remove any debris. Flowing through the strainer, Soma is poetically envisioned as rain pouring down from the celestial heavens. Elsewhere, the pure flowing, or pavamana, Soma, is compared to a bird speeding like a lover to his beloved. Soma is repeatedly strained until he shines like brilliant flashes of lightning, explaining his epithet Sahasrapajas, Soma being the one who glitters in 1,000 ways. Nearly ready for the gods, the purified Soma is poured into the sacrificial drinking vessels. In anticipation, the priests celebrate. He, Soma, tosses his horn and whets on high like a bull. The Lord of the herd thus manifests his might and thereby brings for us his treasures. That comes from Rig Veda, chapter 9, Mandala 9, chapter 15. Now, Vayu is Shukraputapa, the one who drinks bright and purified Soma. And Indra is Shukipa, the one who drinks the clear Soma. These co-devatas of the morning oblation are called by such names, for they alone drink the Soma in its pure, undiluted form. All other gods prefer Soma sweetened with milk or diluted with various admixtures. Partaking of the nectar, the sages sing the glory of Soma. We praise this auspicious elixir, which acts as a bridge to carry us across to the region of excellence and bliss, and which leaves the regions of woe behind. It's Rig Veda, Mandala 9, chapter 41. Now, in the following extracted verses, Soma is credited with an endless array of additional boon-bestowing treasures. Significantly, each boon is followed with the phrase, Ata no Vasyasas Kritiki. O Soma, please make us more glorious and splendid. O Soma, give us light, heavenly light, give us good fortune, and make us more glorious and splendid. O Soma, give us strength, give us wisdom, drive away our adversities, and make us more glorious and splendid. O blissful Soma, by your power and protection, may we live long to enjoy the sun. Please make us more glorious and splendid. O bright weaponed Soma of bliss, shower upon us riches abundant for both worlds. Please make us more glorious and splendid. Again, that comes from the Rig Veda. To date, we have witnessed many nakshatra devatas lose their vital essence at pivotal moments, only to be rebirthed or resurrected by fellow devatas. Such legendary events highlight a god's critical factory or vital essence and serve as metaphorical reenactments for the macrocosmic cycle of birth, disintegration, and resurrection. For example, Prajalpati, the lord of the nakshatra Rohini, that's Brahma, loses his prana, his breath, after creating the creatures of the world. Now Agni enters Prajalpati, who is his father, and resurrects Prajalpati. This event is replicated in the Agni Kayana, the piling of the sacrificial altar. Now Indra, who's the lord of the nakshatra Jyesta, Indra falls asunder at the precise moment of his investiture. His Indra Virya, his bodily strength and virility, flows out from every pore of his body. The Sautraumani is devised for the resurrection of Indra. In similar fashion, Varuna, who rules Satyabhishek, his body falls apart at the exact moment of his kingly coronation, causing his Ugra, his formidable and severe quality, to escape. Varuna recovers his Ugra through the Samriship, the going away offering to 10 devatas. There's also the time when Vishnu severs his own head after encompassing the sacrificial grounds. His Shri, his fame and glory, oozes out from his headless trunk. The Ashvins, the celestial physicians to the gods, quickly come to Vishnu's rescue and restore the head of the sacrifice. In similar fashion, Soma Raj loses his ojas, his life-enhancing sap, when he is repeatedly beaten with the pressing stones. The skillful slaughterers of Soma, who are the priests that harness the stone. That comes from Rig Veda, Mandala 5. His limbs, his stalks, the stalks of Soma, scatter in all directions as his last ounce of sap is violently forced out. If, with the pressing stone, O King Soma, they have cut thy dear limbs, thy firm joints, if they have torn up thy skin, and if they have torn up thy womb. That little quote comes from Taittiriya Brahmana. That's something that's given in that phase. Now, no other devata experiences a more brutal death than Soma, his flesh repeatedly thrashed until the last drop of juice is removed. Having slaughtered Soma for the benefit of the gods, the priests revive him at the end of each evening libation. The sacrificial protocol is an offering of ghee to Agni, a karu to Soma, and an offering of ghee to Vishnu. We hear a quote from Aitareya Brahmana that says, "Those who have extracted the Soma juice have killed Soma. By making this oblation, they produce him anew. Here it is Agni and Vishnu who surround Soma, thereby aiding in his rebirth. Now the author asks, why these two devatas? Recall from the section on the Agnastoma, the one-day Soma Yagna ceremony, that Agni and Vishnu are devatas of Diksha, of initiation. Encompassed by Agni, who represents all the gods, and Vishnu, who represents the sacrifice, the Yajamana is declared reborn. And in this way, in this same fashion, through this whole process, Soma is declared reborn at the end of all this. So hence, with the performance of each Soma Yagna, Soma's birth as he is placed on the antelope's skin-covered throne, his death, his violent thrashing, and his resurrection being surrounded by Agni and Vishnu are ritualistically reenacted. Very interesting in the case of Soma being, again, that self, the principal self of the Jivatman, having to be born on earth, having to die, having to be let go, and then being resurrected, likely through the harmony of what is given in reality through Agni and Vishnu. Now we're going to read a little bit more about Soma and his faculty of ojas. We've still got quite a little bit to go here, folks. I'm going to go to the bathroom for just a moment. And when I come back, we are going to continue in our series on Mrigashirsha and its deity, Soma. I shall be right back. Thank you for your patience, folks. Now let's continue onward. The next chapter, we're going to be talking about Soma and his faculty of ojas. Now, we learn that the frequency with which a devata is eulogized in the Rig Veda is directly proportionate to his significance for the spiritual aspirant. At the top of the list are Agni and Indra. Over 45% of the hymns in the Rig Veda are to their adoration. The organization of the Rig Veda distinguishes another devata, Soma. Amongst the hundreds of gods revered in the Rig Veda, only Soma is deserving of his own whole mandala. All hymns extolling the sweet and ecstatic virtues of this devata, which is 11% of what's contained in the Rig Veda, are all found in mandala number 9, Soma Pavamana. Pavamana meaning flowing, clear, and purified. Now, there are exceptions in 4 hymns in particular that are noted in a footnote here, and they're just little 1 verses. So thus, the significance of Agni, Indra, and Soma to the spiritual quest is implicit in the sacred structure of the Rig Veda, and further evidenced by the frequent laudation of their names within the verses of hymns dedicated to other devatas. Their intimate relationship is suggested by their devatadvandva forms. Again, that's Somendra, which is Soma and Indra. There's Indragni, which is Indra and Agni. And there's Agni Soma, which is, of course, Agni and Soma. These are three different, there's the triad, and, there's, between the three, there's Indra Agni, and then there's Indragni. Then there's Indra Soma, and that's, what was the word for it? Somendra. Indra and Soma become Somendra. And then there is Agni Soma, which is Agni and Soma. So we recall that Agni's faculty is Tejas. Spanish, they often soften the J, but I don't think they do that in Vedic. So recall that Agni's faculty is Tejas. It's radiant heat or brilliant light. Tejas promotes purification and transformation on the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical realms. It imbues the spiritual aspirant with Brahmavarkasa, the luster of knowledge, or Vidya. You can read more about that in the chapter on Agni in Kritika. Now, on a psychological level, Indra represents the mind or the mental faculty. In fact, the word Indriya, the sense organ, is derived from Indra's name, the Indriya, the sense organ. Very deep stuff going on there. Now, the mind is considered the true sense organ, while the Indriyanis, which is the ears, the eyes, the nose, etc., serve as its instruments. Full of Indriya Virya, which is mental fortitude, courage, and sharpness of the senses, like virility, Virya, virility of Indriya, which is the senses. So Indra is the illumined mind of the sacrificer who has full control of his mental faculties. This is why Indra is so highly regarded. Replenishing his Indra Virya with the Soma draft, Indra rises to victorious heights on the battlefield. It goes to show you that somebody who's in tune with their internal soul and self-realization can put the faculty of the mind and the senses to great effort. Soma, feeding. Indriya. It's some of the deepest guts of the Vedas that we're going through here right now, if you are wise and if you're paying attention to what's being said here. Soma represents Ojas, the bodily substance that provides rejuvenation, growth, and nourishment. Just as Indra is dependent on Soma for his Indriya Virya, each person is likewise dependent on Ojas for their strength and vitality. There are two types of Ojas. There's ordinary, which is Apara Ojas, and supreme, which is Para Ojas. Para always means above or beyond. Apara Ojas moves throughout the body and is located in all of the bodily tissues. It aids in the maintenance of the body's integrity and it guards against disease and ill health. Apara Ojas is kind of like what is depicted through Ayurveda in the purely biosphere, the biological sense almost, although that includes mental and emotional health as well. Supreme or para ojas is the most refined of all bodily substances. Present in the body in a quantity of just 8 drops. Para ojas nourishes the subtle sheaths. Associated with the pineal gland, it is released during deep states of meditation, producing the ecstatic bliss of samadhi. Thus, though clothed in hundreds of ornate Vedic rites, rituals, and esoteric hymns, Soma is forever present for the spiritual aspirant, since it is produced naturally within the body. Cool. Located above the third eye, in the locale of the pineal gland, is the Soma chakra. Kamadhenu, the divine wish-fulfilling cow, resides within this nakshatra, within this chakra, the Soma chakra. Kamadhenu may be likened to Soma Krayani, the sacred cow given in exchange for the Soma stalks. More about this is talked about in the chapter on Uttara Ashada and the Vishvadevas. During heightened states of meditation, a single drop of Soma, the milk of divine love, is released from her udders, explaining Soma's epithet, Indu, the bright drop. Those who follow Kriya Yoga, as is given through Self-Realization Fellowship of Paramahansa Yogananda, might be thinking about how this might correlate to the tongue in the back of the throat, the pressing of the tongue on the pineal gland, and even just the Kriya Yoga in the general sense. Now, Kamadhenu's drop of divine love, Soma, purifies the mentality, Indra, and the sense organs. Filled with Indra Virya, the mind of the seeker is illumined, and great clarity governs his mental faculties, the Indriyas. Wow, psychedelic. Now, next, Soma hastens in its might to the pitchers of the heart. This is all coming from Rig Veda Mandala 9. Like the sounding holes, the cavity of the heart amplifies Soma's ecstatic cries. The all-beholding love divine, Soma, green and fresh, all-sustaining, flows through as a filter and drops into the pitcher of the heart with resounding voice. Here, in the depths of the soul, Soma unites with the sacrificial fire. Agni devours Soma on behalf of all divinities. In the depths of the soul, their union completes the sacred act, the opening of the radiant spiritual heart. Wow. It's amazingly deep. Now, another important quote is given from the Rig Veda, but this is not in Mandala 9. This is in Mandala number 1. O you both, Agni Soma, acting graciously, have set up the light of true knowledge in the universe. You both have liberated the flow of virtues and pure thoughts that were bound in fetters of ignorance. Seated on the innermost summit of the heart, glorified by prayers, you both enhance and complete the scope of sacred acts. This is a very important part of this book. I'm very glad to be reading it right now. And that came from Rig Veda Mandala number 1, chapter 93, verse 6. In this way, the Godheads Soma, Indra, and Agni transport the spiritual aspirant into the realm of Indriyananda, the blissful state of the illumined mind. The notion that Soma is Ananda, which is bliss consciousness, is reflected in Mrigashirsha's ancient appellation, the Invakas. Bhatta Bhaskara comments that Invakas, which as we know is one of the root words that were given when we were reading our Taittiriya Brahmana reading of Mrigashirsha. Somasyanvaka, that second word, Anvaka, is what we're talking about here. So we have somebody named Bhatta Bhaskara comments that Invakas is from the root inv, to please or gladden. That's a commentary on the Taittiriya Brahmana from this character, Bhatta Bhaskara Mishra. Now, Mrigashirsha's Shakti is Prinana, which is making the world delightful or blissful. Wonderful. So that is Ojas. That is the capacity to experience the true Ojas, the para, spiritual para Ojas inside of the Soma chakra, which resides around the pineal gland and is connected to the intelligence and the heart. Agni being more heart and Soma being more soul, spiritual intelligence, as I would put it. Beautiful, super psychedelic. Really happy to have gone through that just now, let me tell you. Now, this will be our final chapter before getting into this nakshatra, the native who has the moon or other important placements in this nakshatra. This is the chapter of Soma and the moon. What is the connection of Soma to the moon? A hymn codified in Rig Veda Mandala 10 directly associates Soma with the moon by pairing him with the nakshatras. Thus, Soma, in the midst of all these nakshatras, hath his place. And that's from Rig Veda Mandala 10, verse 85, chapter 85. Now, such literal equation is elsewhere not that evident in the Rig Veda. Instead, the rishis ascribe particular features to Soma that later scriptures overtly credit to the moon. Whether the ancient rishis envisioned Soma as the moon is a topic of much debate and beyond the scope of this book. Cool. What is clear is that by the time of the Yajurveda, Soma is officially fused with the moon in countless myths, metaphors, and epithets. Very interesting. It feels like, yeah, it's interesting that eventually, by the time of the Yajurveda, Soma is fused with the moon. It's interesting that it's not expressly, directly given in the Rig Veda outside of what we just read. So, a footnote says that in a similar vein, Aditi is the universal mother of the gods in the Rig Veda. Yet in the later Vedas and supporting texts, she is fused with Mother Earth. And you can read a bit more about that on the chapter on Punarvasu. Now, what we read, again, just to corroborate what we're talking about here, which is that by the time of the Yajurveda, and remember, the Krishna Yajurveda is where the Taittiriya Brahmana is, that's what it's associated with. So what we read is that in the Rig Veda, Soma mystically descends from the sky in the rain clouds and enters into the streams, the oceans, and the plants. That's Rig Veda the ninth mandala, which is its mandala. In this way, Soma is declared to be the healing sap found in the rivers and in vegetation. Now, over 1,000 years later, the Shatapatha Brahmana credits such attributes to the moon, who by now is explicitly Soma, or the receptacle of Soma at least. And we hear in Shatapatha Brahmana, Soma, the food of the gods, indeed is the moon. At full moon they press him, and in the subsequent half of the month he enters the waters and plants, and the cattle feeding on the water and the plants. Because as we know, the full moon is what gives birth to the nutrients and the nutrition of the plants and of the animals and all these things. So it's as if the first half of the month and right around at the full moon, they press Soma, and the Soma oozes into the rivers, valleys, and the fertility of the vegetation of all things. He, the Soma, the sacrificer, then, during that night of the new moon, collects Soma from the cattle, which is the milk of the cows, for the cows have eaten the plants and drank the waters containing Soma. Wow, very interesting. This same passage refers to Soma as Shashanka, he who is marked like a hare, i.e. the hare in the moon. Interesting. A hare is in a bunny, like H-A-R-E. In similar fashion is the treatment of Soma's likeness to semen, Vretas. Soma is implored in the Rig Veda to implant his seed in the couple desirous of children. Upon the lap of a deity, he, Soma, lays the germ, by means whereof we gain children and progeny. Again, that's Rig Veda Mandala 9. Soma even imbues Indra with his power of virya, which is semen virility, the virility of Indra's semen. In the Taittiriya Brahmana, Soma is known as Soma Retodha, Soma who discharges semen. Soma Retodha works in concert with Agni, here revered for protection, and Indra for the bestowal of strong adult sons. In later Upanishads, the sap contained within the moon is the same milky white substance. The semen comes from the radiant one, the moon, who has 15 parts. Curiously, there is an elusive stanza in the Rig Veda that refers to Soma's relationship with the ancestors. And we quote from Rig Veda Mandala 8. In concert with the mains, O Soma, you have spread out the heaven and earth. Now, this, I guess that would be the mains, would be the ancestors. The affiliation between Soma and the ancestors is later clarified or extended in the Yajurveda Pinda Pitrayagna. So that's the Yajurveda Pindra Pitrayagna. It's the oblation to the ancestors' rite. And this is a particular rite that seems to be given in the Yajurveda. The sacrificer offers both to Agni and Soma. To Agni he offers because Agni is allowed a share in every offering. And to Soma he offers because Soma is sacred to the fathers, i.e. Soma is the deity of the mains, the ancestors in this particular picture. He offers with the formulas, to Agni, the bearer of what is meant for the wise, Svaha. To Soma, accompanied by the fathers, Svaha, the fathers means the pitris, the ancestors. So in this same passage, reference is made to Soma Pitrimat, Soma who accompanies the fathers, in Pitraha Somavantaha, the fathers who are possessed of Soma. So the mystical connection between Soma as the moon and the ancestors is more explored in chapter 8, chapter 28 of this text, which is the path of the luminaries. It seems to be an extra section of this book that I've never really realized is there. And it seems to me that it just gives more information on the luminaries, the sun and the moon, which is something I'll have to read at some point. So hence, any doubt that Soma is literally or allegorically the moon is fully resolved in later Vedic literature especially. Just as importantly, Soma is officially honored as the deity of the manes, the ancestors, the pitris, while Yama is declared their king. I'm yawning so much today. Yama is the king of the ancestors, the pitris, and Soma is honored as their deity. Now, the following is an early lore recounted in the Taittiriya Brahmana, that's the Taittiriya Samhita, in which Soma is seen as the moon. Here, Daksha Prajalpati bestows his 27 daughters, the Nakshatras, in marriage to King Soma. We read a footnote here that says, interestingly, in this same legend, the Nakshatras are enumerated as 33 rather than 28. A commentator, Max Muller, proposes the explanation that in the ancient lists of the Nakshatras, 6 are referred to as dual, while also noting the translator's explanation. Professor Cowell explains the number by counting the Kritikas as 7 and the other Nakshatras as 1. Is the opinion of the author officially, Radha, that the 33 is intended to implicate the Nakshatra Devatas as members of the 33 divine forces. So that's an interesting debated thing that the author felt necessary to make a footnote of there. But in any case, what we read is that in the early lore recounted in the Taittiriya Samhita, Soma is seen as the moon. Daksha Prajalpati bestows his 27 daughters, the Nakshatras, in marriage to King Soma. Daksha's one condition is that King Soma must spend equal time with each wife throughout the course of the lunar month. And of course, a lunar month is defined by the number of days required for the moon to return to a particular nakshatra position, which is 27.32 days. Now, infatuated by Rohini, the 4th lunar nakshatra, for its beauty and sensuality, Soma decides to only dwell with her, with Rohini. The other wives, therefore, curse their husband with the king's evil, a form of tuberculosis affecting the lymph nodes. And this causes King Soma to lose weight and to wane day by day. Yet with the blessing of the Adityas, Soma is cured of his illness and once again is seen aglow in the night sky. And this, of course, this is the moon waxing and waning, is what is described here, which is an old, cool Vedic epithet going on. Now, this lore appears to be the basis for the ancient English tradition of curing tuberculosis through the touch of royalty, meaning the king or queen, just as Soma was cured of tuberculosis by the blessing or touch of the royal sun gods. Interesting. Now, here we see the blessing of the Adityas curing Soma of his illness so he can be again aglow in the night sky. And this is coming from, what would this be? This is coming from the Taittiriya Samhita. Prajalpati gave them, his daughters, to Soma, the king. Of them he associated only with Rohini. Thus they returned in anger to their father. Then Soma he followed and asked for them back. So then he, Prajalpati, would not return his daughters. He said, "Swear on oath that thou wilt equally associate with all of them. Then I will return them to you." He took the oath, and Prajalpati returned his daughters to Soma. But again, Soma associated with Rohini alone. Then illness seized him. Illness has seized the king. That saying is the origin of the king's evil, and that he became worse. That is the origin of the bad illness. And because King Soma got it from the curse of his wives, that is also the origin of the wife's disease, Jayanya. Him who knows thus the origin of these illnesses do not visit. Soma approached his wives respectfully. They said, "Let us choose a boon. Do thou associate equally with us." For him, they, his wives, offered an oblation to the Adityas, and hence they freed him from this evil case. It's interesting that really it goes to show that for whatever's going on with Rohini that is beautiful and attracts the moon, it kind of shows that the moon cannot dwell strictly on what is considered good or beautiful to the soul only. The soul must experience all the 27 dimensions of reality which all the nakshatras convey, or else we will get ill, and we will only stick to our limited frame of what we think is good for us. For one who is seized by the bad illness, they should offer this oblation to the Adityas. Verily, they have recourse to the Adityas with their own share. They free him from the evil case of such a circumstance. And there we go. This kind of conveys. In this tale, the moon is unable to resist the temptation of his senses, emphasizing the fickle nature of this planet, the moon, as well as the fickle nature of Mrigashirsha. More importantly, the moon is singled out as a karaka or significator for the lymph nodes. And hence, when afflicted in the natal birth chart, this may indicate tuberculosis or this Jayanya disease. The prescriptive rite for curing such illness is offering to the Adityas, suggestive of the sun as a significator for health and healing. Interesting. Now, notice that it is the sun, portrayed as the Adityas, the royal sun gods, that causes King Soma to wax once again, to be full and to come out of its tuberculosis state. The notion that the moon is rebirthed by the sun is likewise expressed in the Aitareya Brahmana. The scripture states that at the time of the new moon, the moon is absorbed by the sun, and from the sun, the moon is then reborn. It's almost like how Mrigashirsha ultimately has described this, what we've read in the Taittiriya Brahmana's descriptions, the Somasyanvaka, Soma's entreaty, Soma's song, occurs through diffusion. And the diffusion that we experience ultimately finds harmonious weavings through those things which relate to the eternal self And what is that eternal self? It's the sun. It's Atman. It is the aspect of ourselves that has eternally been there throughout all of the diffusions that occur through the moon, incarnation to incarnation to incarnation. It's very psychedelic how it's all wrapped up here in the way that it is. This has been a great reading and a great chapter, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this as well. We got one thing left to read here, folks. Next up, the final part of our reading today, we're going to be discussing from the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras, as portrayed in the Vedas. We are going to be discussing the native. And you can, check out the video that I've got here on Mrigashira Nakshatra in the Vedas to give a little bit more backdrop on Soma as a deity of Mrigashirsha. Now we're talking about the native. We're talking about how does the qualities that we've learned about Soma as a deity play in the character of somebody who has the moon in Mrigashirsha Nakshatra or who has any important emphasis of planets in Mrigashirsha. We read that Jyotisha Shastra classifies Mrigashirsha as a divine, a Deva nakshatra, of a soft or tender mridu quality. In the stellar space of Mrigashirsha, Prajalpati, which is the deity of Brahma, who rules Rohini, which is the nakshatra that came just before Mrigashirsha. In the stellar space of Mrigashirsha, Prajalpati Brahma transforms into a stag and pursues his own daughter. Pierced by Rudra's arrow, Prajalpati's head flies up and lands in that space of the sky, occupied by the stars of Mrigashirsha. Hence, the stellar configuration of this nakshatra is in the form of a deer's head. So it's Prajalpati's head. Interesting. This is also suggested by its name. Mrigashirsha means the head of a deer or antelope. Importantly, it is the head of a male deer. Got it. It's a stag. Okay. So it's Prajalpati's head that is there. So thus many facets of the native are gleaned from the nature and behavior of stags and secondarily deer. So there is a passion, there is a sort of, not aggression, although I'm going to see what we're going to read here, but there is a one-pointedness towards experiencing that which is inside the self as the moon, as the Jivatman. And the meek, gentle quality of the deer is considered secondary to this author, which is interesting. So let's read about what is said here. A mature stag is recognized by its full-grown set of antlers, a process that begins slowly and requires repeated shedding until their final shape is cast. In similar fashion, time is required for the native of Mrigashirsha to reach full maturity, and the process will no doubt involve a series of trials and tribulations. Once fully matured, the native is at last viewed by others as a leader of the herd, of their own herd. And of course, becoming a leader means you must go through the transfusions, the diffusions of being in the herd that you identify with internally. Indeed, Soma Raj is a handful of nakshatra devatas. King Soma Raj, the deity of Mrigashirsha, is among a handful of nakshatra devatas deserving of the title of king. Other devatas include Indra, Varuna, and Yama, in particular. But we read of Soma Raj that he is the king of Brahmins. That comes from the Shatapatha Brahmana. And he's also known as the king of the plant kingdom in Mandala 10 of the Rig Veda. Now, central to the elaborate Soma Yagna ceremony, which is a key sacrificial rite, all the yagnas, the Vedic yagnas, are considered to be the divine Vedic rite that symbolizes everything going on in the nakshatras. Even the way that the Vedic ceremony is laid out, it's a ceremony that takes a year to prepare, and there's deep intentions laid out in a sacrificial, devotional way throughout the year leading up to this ceremony. The Vedic yagna is the key to understanding what the nakshatras are. And the Soma Yagna particularly relates to what Soma is in the Vedic mind. And so that's why when we read about the ceremony, we get a glimpse of what Soma is and what it represents to the Vedic mind. So central to the elaborate Soma Yagna ceremony is the symbolic rebirth, the initiation of the Yajamana into manhood, and that is the person going through the Vedic ceremony, the Vedic sacrifice ceremony. They're experiencing a death and rebirth, an initiation in this ceremony. Hence the transition of Mrigashirsha natives, the person with the moon in Mrigashirsha, their transition into adulthood is typically the grand finale of a particular accomplishment, feat, or event. So that is almost like some great accomplishment for Mrigashirsha natives. They will make some big accomplishment in their lives, and this will signify for them a feeling of coming into the initiation, into rebirth, into life, into manhood or womanhood in a true sense. These transitional stages would be important for Mrigashirsha natives. Now, Soma is the portal through which priests and men transcend everyday reality. Soma is very important, as we've just read in our series talking about Soma as a deity. Not surprisingly, this native of Mrigashirsha displays a great fascination for altered states of consciousness, and will often leverage external substances to induce such states. It's interesting to see how somebody might have positive planets here and experience perhaps some strength in the world of psychedelics or altered states of any sort, not necessarily just through the imbibing of substances, such as meditation, psychedelic forms of yoga and pranayama, etc., even tantra. In charts suggesting a natural proclivity towards spirituality, an exploration of alternative realities opens the door to higher truths of self-realization. However, if Mrigashira Nakshatra is gravely afflicted, such practices can become little more than a means of self-medication and possibly even self-distraction and self-destruction. Now, I just want to read this for a moment. Now, in charts suggesting more worldly involvement, there is an unquenchable thirst for pursuing the many pleasures of life. Recall that prinana, which means making the world more enjoyable or pleasing, is the Shakti of Mrigashirsha. So the Shakti of Mrigashirsha is all about making the world more tolerable, making us able to experience it in a more tolerable way, to bring joy from what is inside of the self. and the experience of joy, the experience of the bliss of what one is, of Ananda, is depicted as being central to what Soma is, which is very deep, something super psychedelic going on there. But in particular for Mrigashirsha natives, the concept of self-enjoyment, of enjoying life, becomes, enjoying life through being what you inherently are and enjoying what you inherently are is a big important theme that can either launch them towards success or drag them down towards failure. Now, unfortunately, this author sometimes describes the character of these nakshatras through the ancient idea that the nakshatra and the sign has a shared resonance, as a shared symbology. They are talking now in this part about what happens when planets are in Taurus versus planets when are in Gemini. In today's day and age, Mrigashirsha does not fall into Taurus, so that's why I'm going to ignore those bits. Now, ultimately, pleasure-seeking and sensory indulgences are compelling forces in the life of Mrigashirsha natives. We recall that Prajapati pursues his own daughter, Usas, and Soma gets hot and bothered over Tara, the wife of another god, and it causes disruption in the divine pantheon. Soma can't help but get super hot and bothered about somebody named Tara, who is the wife of Brihaspati, who's a sage. And Brihaspati, just is sage-like and is kind of unaffected by it internally. But the sage knows that it's technically wrong. And so that's why all the gods scramble at that moment to figure out how we got to deal with the fact that Soma just stole an important sage's wife. Because Soma gets lost to the musk of its own enjoyment. In these legends, desire supersedes principles of right and wrong. Thus, the Mrigashirsha native can assertively seek after what they desire, despite known repercussions. It's gently listening to the taboo desires and enjoyments that are born inside the heart and soul. We want to do it fearlessly, but we still have to have our spiritual wits about us. We still want to abide by Ganesha, Ganapatye, which is a combination of intuition, our intellect, which I believe would be Ga, with Na, which is wisdom. It might be the other way, actually. That would make sense. I believe that Ga is wisdom, a universal wisdom, and then Na, like Narada, is a self-realized wisdom of how wisdom applies to us, including all these dark parts of the mind that involve our desires. When we abide by Ganesha, we can oversee the little mouse of the mind through the Ga of wisdom, Ganeshwara, right? So this is why it's important for someone with Mrigashirsha to explore what's inside them, to explore their desires openly, without fear, but also abide by universal wisdom. Now, prevalent themes in the life of this native may include seduction, abduction, and even stalking, especially if it kind of goes bad. And this sort of, again, there is a lot of the times the nakshatras can abide by a sense of the nakshatras are morally ambiguous in the sense that the nature of nature is conveyed through the nakshatras in a very strong way. Mrigashirsha, having been abducted by its own father, and this incestuous element of that story, goes to show at some level that there is the capacity for a Mrigashirsha native to experience a desire to explore taboos and especially sexual taboos related to kink and to the sexual phases of submissive versus dominant, and all the sort of kinky playouts that can happen between an alpha and a beta, a pusher and a receiver, and the vice versa of those things. In my opinion, such things can be done safely, communicated effectively, if we don't take them as a taboo that is unable to be explored with mindful purpose. We should be open to whatever is inside of our hearts and explore them with meditative mind, so that not only do we not get attached to them, but they don't become an unconscious shadow where we chew the cud of wondering about those unexplored desires in our deepest moments of meditation, and it fogs us because we have not allowed ourselves to explore it. That being said, it's important for this type of person to meditate on the nature of the eternal self, which is beyond these phases of the mind. The sun, the Atman, which is beyond this astral karma of a person who wants to explore these kinks and other such things. Just because you're beyond it, Shiva is beyond it, doesn't mean you can't explore it. But just because you explore it doesn't mean you need to identify with it at the deepest sense. It's objectivity is what's going on here. I digress. Look to the tenure of the chart and the nature of the Mrigashirsha's planet. So whatever planets or whatever's going on in Mrigashirsha, to determine if the native's deep-seated urges are within the realm of decency and aligned with universal principles. If influenced by multiple malefics, the native may spend a lifetime trapped in a vicious cycle of never-ending cravings that would be difficult to get out of. Now, this would probably happen especially if you have either a planet there or a difficultly placed planet in the chart. If the sign is not well, if you've got a hard planet there, especially Mars, Saturn, or the Sun, the malefic Moon, malefic Mercury, and if those planets are not well supported generally in the chart, this is when these kinds of afflictions can happen. It's like you never get enough of the craving represented by Mrigashirsha. You never feel fully like you're enjoying the bliss, the ananda that is talked about in the Vedas and etc. Until you start to meditate. That'll be my final word in my own train of thought there. Now, Buddha, Mercury, is born from Soma's affair with Tara, and is later adopted by Brihaspati, who is Tara's original husband. Hence, on the familial side, out-of-wedlock pregnancies and or adoption may be in order for those with afflictions to Mrigashira Nakshatra. As for social habits, I should say, my friend Reshma, I'm glad to be having you here. You have Venus in Mrigashira Nakshatra. Very interesting. And I hope that this story has been giving you some elucidation on what Mrigashirsha is all about. Now, as for social habits, a stag is known for its preference of traveling alone. Hence the proverb, going stag, meaning without a partner at a social gathering, a stag party. Alternatively, the stag may elect to travel in a small band of fellow stags during the non-mating season. In either case, time away from the hustle and bustle of crowds is a must-have for the Mrigashirsha Native. Often, just a handful of deep, close friends is all that the Mrigashirsha Native requires for companionship. Now, Soma's dearest companion is Indra, who is dependent on the Soma draft for strength and courage. Without beloved Soma, Indra is but an ordinary god. Somewhere in the life of the native there is an Indra, one who is likely dependent upon the Mrigashirsha Native, and probably derives great courage and fortitude from him. To determine who that person might be, look to the house placement or rulership of the planet that is in Mrigashirsha. For example, if the 10th Bhavabhavesha, the 10th Lord, is in Mrigashirsha, like let's say if you're a Cancer rising, Aries is the 10th house of Cancer, the 10th Bhavesha. So if Mars falls into Mrigashirsha, then that's the 10th Lord falling into Mrigashirsha. In such a case, it might be possible that the Indra in your life might be a boss or a superior at work. If the 3rd house lord falls into Mrigashirsha, it's more likely a sibling. If the 5th lord falls into Mrigashirsha, look for a child or a student to fill this role of an Indra who depends on you, or on whom you depend in certain ways to be given courage and fortitude in a mutual way. Very interesting. Now, it's worth noting that Soma, along with Agni, is the foremost god of the Vedic ritual, of the Vedic sacrificial yajnas. So thus the native may display an interest in spiritual or societal rites and rituals. Now, finally, a discussion of the native's life would be lacking without an inquiry into the impact of Soma's brutal and theatrical death. This is part of what we've read in the video that I've done where I talk about Soma here, the Soma deity of Mrigashirsha. What was described is that during the ceremony, the Soma Yagna ceremony, the Soma stalk, the plant that holds Soma inside it, is beaten and chopped up and squeezed in order to get the juice out. In the same way, what appears as ordinary green stalks on the outside of the Soma plant are ruthlessly beaten with stones in order to extract the rare and precious red Soma juice. Without a doubt, Soma is the sole sacrificial substance worth more than its weight in gold. So similarly, residing within the depths of the Mrigashirsha Native is a rare and valuable gem, a priceless ruby waiting to be unearthed. Perhaps that ruby is an unusual talent or rare knowledge. Perhaps it is their life's calling that is deep somewhere inside them. Extraction of this ruby is no simple feat. Repeated thrashings from a teacher, a mentor, or a guru, or some kind of repetitive life lesson leads to the discovery of this gemstone inside the soul of whatever it is. Only then, when beholding such marvel, is the ceaseless need for pleasure at last satiated. It is at that moment that the true ecstasy and life-intoxicating Soma is experienced. Whatever is the true meaning and purpose inside the self has to go through some kind of tapas, some kind of fire of Agni, some kind of sort of initiation, some kind of sacrifice ceremony. Something must be sacrificed in you in order to finally be freed from the sensate desires of meaningless sensual cravings and to be put into a purposefulness that aligns with the self, that gives joy for what the nature of the joy inside the self inherently has been throughout the whole life of the person. And that is when Soma is experienced at its best. It's a metaphor for everybody. It's particularly a poignant metaphor for the Mrigashirsha Native. So, that would be it. This is all, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that everybody has enjoyed this reading and this rendering today. I'm Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this. I hope the interpretations have been good. I hope that the character of Soma that we've described can give you a peace and an understanding of what Mrigashira Nakshatra natives are all about. I'm Dustin Cormier. Thanks again for doing this with me. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment, and I'll do my best to comment back. Keep your eyes peeled because we've got more stuff happening. I'm going to start doing this Thursdays as well as Sundays whenever I can. So hang out with me because we've got more to come, folks. Thanks so much for watching. And thanks to Reshma Narayansamy for hanging out with me and being a part of this reading today. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, folks.